Russia made its biggest mistake since Soviet times and received tens of thousands of troops from North Korea. At first glance, this support seemed to favor Russian President Vladimir Putin. The North Korean soldiers were also happy about it. North Korea is a country completely isolated from the rest of the world, with very difficult living conditions and inhumane propaganda that is hard to believe. North Korea is indeed described as the worst place in the world to do military service. Those who managed to escape from North Korea described it as a hell. Military service in North Korea lasts between 5 and 13 years. The biggest hardship soldiers have to endure is constant hunger. Soldiers in special units are well looked after, but those stationed outside the capital, Pyongyang, are given only 2 or 3 potatoes per meal, or are fed only raw corn kernels or corn rice. With inadequate rations, soldiers not only train, but also perform physical tasks, such as helping farmers in the rice fields. Many of them become very weak and hungry and are desperate to escape. In North Korea, Kim Jong soldiers, who are under immense repression, thought things would be much more humane once they stepped onto the battlefield. But with the lifting of the restrictions on ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles, North Korean soldiers arriving on the battlefronts for Russia are facing a real hell. When these long-range missiles were fired at Kursk and Bryansk, Kim Jong's soldiers saw the true face of war. In November 2024, a devastating attack by British Storm Shadow missiles allegedly killed a top Russian general and 500 North Korean soldiers. One of Kim Jong-Un's generals was reportedly wounded in the attack while commanding troops supporting Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. In addition, thousands of drones and kamikaze drones sent by the Ukrainian military into Russian territory created a ring of fire that North Korean soldiers saw for the first time. Both long-range missiles and drones have changed the perspective of North Korean soldiers loyal to Kim Jong on the war between Russia and Ukraine. The soldiers from Pyongyang, who had come to fight for Putin, realized that the situation was much more critical than in North Korea. The attacks in Kursk shook the faith of the North Korean soldiers to the core. So what was the solution for the North Korean soldiers fighting for Russia? Of course, the only chance for the North Koreans was to get away from the front lines, even to escape. They wanted somehow to get out of this hell, even to the point of considering returning home as a reward. With Ukraine's ATACMS and Storm Shadow missile strikes, the desertion of North Korean troops from the war fronts has become an expected phenomenon. If they don't, their fate could be similar to that of Russian soldiers sent as cannon fodder. North Korean soldiers are also aware of what these missiles can do for the Ukrainian army. That's why tensions between the soldiers are running high. One mistake could cause them to never open their eyes again. There is no room for error, especially on the front lines of the war between Ukraine and Russia. Without any combat experience, North Korean soldiers are much more prone to such mistakes than Russian forces. The first time Ukraine targeted groups of North Korean soldiers, a group of 40 North Koreans was destroyed by a HIMARS strike. Only one North Korean soldier survived and surrendered to the Ukrainian army. The soldier's confessions were shocking. He told his comrades that war is the real hell and accused Putin of deceiving their supreme leader, Kim Jong. The wounded North Korean soldier also emphasized that the real hell was the front line and that they had been deceived. He claims that he was told that they would protect the infrastructure, but the North Koreans were betrayed and sent to attack the Kursk region. The soldier added the following: "The Russians provided us with nothing. They dragged us into the attack without prior notice, without ammunition, without normal weapons." So the North Korean soldiers really wanted to go home or get out of this hell. In mid-October, the North Koreans deserted from the Russian war camps without ever being in combat. In the case of October 15th, 18 North Korean soldiers deserted and were captured by Russian FSB forces 2 days later. All these incidents have intensified Pyongyang's approach to the desertion of its troops. It is estimated that there will be mass desertions among more than 10,000 North Korean soldiers, including 500 officers and 3 generals, fearing future Ukrainian attacks with ATAC-MS and Storm Shadow missiles. Currently, the majority of these soldiers are in Kursk Oblast, with some in Belgorod. A certain number are stationed near the northeastern lines of Ukraine's border with Russia. Most of these North Korean soldiers probably don't want to die for the invasion dreams of another country's president. Kim Jong, on the other hand, plans to mobilize another 100,000 North Korean troops as part of the military technology he will receive from Russia. This is really a big dilemma. If Kim Jong does this, if he puts many more North Korean soldiers under Putin's command and sends them to the war fronts, the situation could become much worse. The Ukrainians would probably not hesitate to use ATACMS and Storm Shadow stockpiles to hunt them down. This will increase North Korean soldiers' attempts to desert from the front lines. Will thousands of North Korean soldiers fulfill their duty as cannon fodder, or will they flee the front at the first opportunity? Ukrainian intelligence has integrated the North Korean language into the I Want to Live project and developed special propaganda for them. In addition, North Korean defector ex-soldiers living in South Korea have volunteered to convince their North Korean comrades to surrender or defect. It is claimed that North Korean soldiers must surrender or defect, or else they will all perish, whether 10,000 or hundreds of thousands. The most remarkable claim came from a North Korean defector. The North Korean deserter said that all North Korean battalions will leave the front line when they attack Ukraine. Hyun-Seung Lee, who served in the North Korean army in the 2000s, claims that the soldiers sent to help Putin's illegal invasion have been considering desertion all along. Lee said in a statement that soldiers in North Korea would have been forced to leave and would have been young and not very committed to fighting. At first, there will be individual deserters, but over time, I think there will be a large number of group deserters, including officers, he said. On October 15th, Lee's claims were confirmed by both Ukrainian and Russian intelligence. 18 North Korean soldiers deserted without a fight. Lee says this is because the Russians are likely to treat them as expendable, and even worse than their own soldiers. Russian soldiers don't respect them as fellow fighters, he said. They will treat them like human shields. Lee said the North Koreans will eventually understand the hierarchy and how they are seen as expendable by the Russians and will want to flee. He said North Korea is not equipped to constantly prepare its troops for combat, and ammunition and bombs would need to be replenished. Instead, they train for show so they can appear in parades or propaganda videos. These soldiers come from the North Korean working class and would be ambivalent about fighting for the regime. They are just looking for food and then trying to advance their careers. Lee emphasized that these young soldiers have no real loyalty to the regime and have no choice but to move to Russia on Kim Jong's orders. It was predicted that they would die without taking any hits, and so it seems to have happened. When Storm Shadow missiles attacked an underground main command center in Kursk, where Russians and North Koreans were stationed, 500 North Korean soldiers were eliminated without firing a shot. Putin and Kim Jong-Un would have expected more from them, but it seems that they will not get the expected results. On the other hand, for North Korean soldiers, their families could be a problem. But since North Korea keeps all its military movements secret, some families will not even know that their brothers, sons, or fathers are fighting in Russia. In this situation, desertion is one of the most attractive options for North Korean soldiers. North Korean soldiers are likely to be vulnerable to psychological operations used by the Ukrainian government to force them to desert. They have never worked together with the Russian military before. The two countries have no experience of working together as a military force, and it is unclear how effective it would be for North Korean soldiers with no combat experience to join a Russian battalion. There will be fundamental challenges of religion, education, culture, and geography. The former Ukrainian defense minister recently suggested that 90% of North Korean soldiers will die in this war. This dire prediction could be used to make these young men question whether their lives are worth sacrificing for Kim Jong-un's financial gain and Putin's war ambitions. For Ukraine's most powerful weapon is not firepower, but the truth, communicated directly and powerfully. Ukraine's I Want to Live project has released a new video in Korean calling on North Korean soldiers to surrender to Ukrainian forces when they are deployed to conflict zones. The video, which features Ukrainian prisoner of war camps, says that upon surrender, North Korean soldiers will be held in accordance with the Geneva Conventions, and that the Ukrainian side will guarantee safe detention, food, and medical care, no matter how many troops Pyongyang sends to help Russia. No matter where the target is, Ukrainian POW camps are ready to receive soldiers of all nationalities, religions, and ideological views. The 24-hour hotline launched by the Main Directorate of Intelligence of Ukraine in September 2022 was intended to help Russian soldiers voluntarily surrender themselves or their units to the Ukrainian army. It is now expected to expand to serve North Korean soldiers willing to surrender. So what are effective strategies for persuasion? One such strategy is broadcasting in the North Korean language. As South Korea has done for years in the DMZ, the Ukrainians could place loudspeakers near the front lines to broadcast 24/7 in Korean. These broadcasts could emphasize the futility of the mission, the lack of reward, and the fact that Kim Jong-Un profits from his deployments without offering anything in return. Another strategy could be leafleting with drones. Together with drones, Ukrainians could distribute leaflets revealing the truth about Kim Jong-un's deal with Putin and the lack of real compensation for the soldiers. The leaflets could also include details about potential safe harbors and surrender instructions, encouraging them to make a choice between survival and freedom. A third strategy could be portable radios. The Ukrainians could leave small radios tuned to Korean broadcasts that could reach these soldiers day and night. These broadcasts could include the voices of former North Korean soldiers sharing their personal experiences of life in South Korea and urging their comrades to seek freedom. The fourth tactic could be psychological warfare units. Specialized psychological warfare teams could be deployed, including North Korean defectors who understand the mindset and language of these units. This approach can be incredibly effective because these defectors know how to communicate messages that resonate with deployed troops. The fifth method could be a project to establish a network of safe houses, food sources, and counseling teams to psychologically stabilize defectors after surrender. This project would be critical for immediate security and reassurance to encourage more North Korean soldiers to flee the front lines. Ukrainian military officials have also made important assessments about how to get North Korean soldiers to give up fighting for Russia. In their view, the greatest weapon against these soldiers is reality. Kim Jong-un's greed and the reality of their situation can break the psychological chains that bind them to a regime that sees them as expendable. Many of these soldiers have never tasted freedom. They have been brainwashed to believe that loyalty to Kim is the only way to survive. But when faced with the choice to surrender and have a new life, most North Korean soldiers can choose hope over fear. So in this war, Ukraine has an opportunity not only to neutralize a new threat, but also to save the lives of young men who didn't want to be there in the first place. By targeting their morale, Ukraine can stop North Korean troops without firing a single bullet and turn this challenge into a powerful statement for freedom. Ukraine's defense intelligence representative, Andriy Yusov, said that more than 300 Russian soldiers had surrendered to Ukrainian captivity as of June as a result of a government initiative. Yusov emphasized that the more than 35,000 applications came mainly from Russian military personnel and people who could take part in the Russian armed forces and wanted to protect themselves, who wanted to participate in aggressive war and not become war criminals. The vast majority of them are willing to return home after the end of hostilities. However, in order to avoid problems with the law in the future, they are registered as taken prisoner, rather than being marked as having voluntarily deserted or surrendered. Thousands of North Korean soldiers are expected to be added to this number over time. North Korean citizens have no access to the internet, and very few have computers. Smartphones in North Korea have limited functionality and are subject to surveillance and control measures. This makes them useful only for basic communications and consumption of state-approved content. However, It is estimated that a significant number of North Korean soldiers sent to war on behalf of Russia have access to phones. So it is still possible for these soldiers to access the site using messengers, a hotline, and a chatbot operated by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. It would probably be best for North Korean soldiers to surrender to Ukraine through I Want to Live or other means. This way, Pyongyang soldiers would not suffer so much from the effects of the harsh side of the war, and would perhaps even have a very different life. Of course, the possibility that such methods will not work should not be ruled out. The Ukrainian side is constantly keeping an eye on this possibility and has been monitoring North Korean troops fighting on Russia's side, especially in Kursk. In particular, the increasing probability of an attack and the possibility of ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles hitting the Russian territory where North Korean troops are stationed again is narrowing the time and gradually eliminating the chance of making a choice. In short, under all this risk environment, North Korean soldiers seem to have a short time. Therefore, they need to do something to save their lives. Thank you for tuning in.